What the Heck's, your source for Warhammer Underworlds in under 30 points that I don't like, but I'm going to allow. I'm your co-host, Davey, and with me today I got Josh. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing well, Davey.
I'm glad to hear it. It's been a hot second since we've got to throw down, but we're going to get a chance soon. We'll talk about that in a second. For context, we're recording on the 4th of January, so we're just into 2023. It's our first episode of the new year. And we are going to do the promised tribute to the late, great Chatting Crit, where we pick a debate topic relevant to the community at hand and discuss it. And you can be the judge of who comes out on top, or if it's if maybe there's no winners here. Who's to say? But we'll get into that. We put out a poll on our Discord for which of our two topics. Between that and soliciting feedback from listeners, we've landed on a discussion about the number of warbands and what should be done. We're going to break that down further once we get to there. But we got some of our usual segments to go through. To community shout-outs. Josh, what do you want to talk community-wise here?
All right, so we've got our tournament coming up on the 21st of January. It's going to be at Noble Knight Games right away when they open up at 10 o'clock, and it's going to be championship. Going to be a great time.
Yeah. We'd love to see you come in from wherever. If you are new and want to check it out, we're gonna let us know. Tell us you're coming. We're gonna have a link on the site. Let us know that you're new, and we'll make sure we got something to whatever you're missing. We'll make sure you have it so you can play.
Absolutely. And speaking of our local community and bad segues, we've got our league coming up tomorrow, January 5th. We will be starting off with that. No set format, so long as both opponents are happy to play, then we're all set. So again, if you're part of our community or somebody new, go ahead and come on out. It'll be at 6 o'clock at Noble Knight Games.
I'm going to get way off topic for a second here. You mentioned bad segues. That made me think we have some shirts and stuff up. We haven't had a new merch idea for a little while. There could be a spinoff like the Bad Segway Gang. And
oh my God, it could be, yes.
And it's just like leather jackets and what do you call it? The bikers wear a cut or whatever. But we're all riding segways. I'll beat up segways.
Oh, I would love that so much.
Just aviators, smoking cigs and
I
riding
have
segways.
I have somebody who's real quick with bad Photoshop, so I can definitely ask her if she can put that together.
All right, let's see. We'll come back around. We'll get it to our marketing department and see where we go. Let's see. We got a couple things that listeners have written in about. One is Mike S's event. This is Sleek's Bowl, who has been kicking out a blog. We've linked it several times. He is going to be running an event on the 12th of February at Gordon's Good Games in Atascadero. That's between LA and San Francisco out on the West Coast. Start at 1 p.m. Be rivals format and tons of stuff, prizes given away, Gnarlwood warbands, universal cards, game tokens, that sort of thing. And then there'll be some number of boards, warbands, and dice provided if you are just looking to try it out. You can get in touch. The easiest way, we'll link to some information about it on our site, but the easiest way is hop on our Discord and seek out Sleek's Bowl and ask him about it. We'll make sure he kind of posts the event there on the Discord too, so that it's there. And in another part of the world altogether, Tristan has asked us to plug the Warhammer Underworld's World Team Championship. It's been open for registration. It's going to be May 27th to 29th. It's in Herford, Germany. It uses 5-player teams. Currently, Italy, Poland, France, Germany, and Austria are all signed up. He's working on me to try and get an American team going. That sounds pretty amazing. It's a pretty big ask. And yeah, to be clear, this is an in-person event. So I know that we have loved being part of the team events that we've participated in the past. So if you get a chance to do that in person, highly encouraged. Just want to cut in with some breaking news about Grand Clash at Adepticon. Our sources have told us at the time of this release that we have confirmed there will be a GW run event. It's going to be Grand Clash. Tons of slots available. Day one is the 25th of March. That would be the Saturday. And day two is for the top cut. Currently, there's a little bit of confusion about what the format will be. The announcement lists both Nemesis and Championship, so we expect to see clarity on that in a few days. But everyone here at What the Hex hopes to see you there. And back to the show. That's that. Hey, what the heck is going on with you, Josh?
I've had a really busy holiday season, which is unusual. Usually, it's enough to keep me on my toes, but not enough to keep me like running from place to place, and it's been good. Haven't done a whole lot with Underworlds. I was able to reach peak adulthood, and over Christmas I got gifted some shelving. So definitely using that to reupholster some of the hobby space.
Oh man, I'm glad you said reupholster. I was like, oh man, is it like now that I got shelf space, I can reupholster my couch? And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're blasting straight from adulthood straight through like grandparenthood.
No, not quite, not quite. Maybe reupholster was the wrong word. Refurnish. That's the
All
word I'm
right,
looking for.
there we go. All right, whew, close one. I same thing. With family visiting and that sort of thing. It's been hard to get some underworlds in lately. Been doing a little bit of reading, a little bit of thinking. Really excited to get going with our league again. The nature of my work means that I will. I think I'm going to be able to make it tomorrow. I'll miss a few weeks and then I'll come back. So I'm going to be trying to fill in along the sides. But now now I have the next 24 hours to kind of grapple over like what warband to bust out for in person. I don't know. It's just so many. Perhaps you might say too many good choices. I don't know.
Oh
We'll
my! Would
we'll
you say
sort that
too
out in a
many?
second. We'll find out. Uh, we're gonna get there. Let's kick these off. We're gonna do our main topic here, and that is that debate that is on the listener voted topic of what to do about the number of war bands now up to 47 at the time of recording. Uh, we're going to be taking one side or the other. One is we don't need to do anything about it; it's fine, and the other is we should do something about it. I.e., the most commonly mentioned thing is rotate. Well, we can talk more about that. But in the grand tradition of chatting crit, we are going to randomize which side of this debate we have to take, and then at the end we can maybe say what our own opinion was on it. But what you're going to hear is we're going to be trying to make points in one way or the other. They might not necessarily be a point that we uh, feel represents our personal point of view, but we're just trying to get that out there. So trying this out. I have in my hand 4 Underworld's dice. We're gonna dice this off. How do you want to do this?
Winner takes rotation.
Okay. The winner has to argue in favor of rotation, in favor of something must be done. Sound good?
All right, sounds good to
Okay.
me.
What
Let's roll.
which Underworld's dice do you have in your hand there?
I have the Gnarlwoods dice in my hand.
I've got the Grand Alliance Chaos dice.
Ooh,
2
nice
attack
choice.
dice and 1 defense dice because I'm feeling a little more on the attack right now.
Ooh, okay.
There we go. I've got 1 crit.
I have
2 smash and a dodge, so just a crit.
I have drum roll, please.
Okay.
I have 1 double. So you get to take the rotate stance.
That sounds like a Josh roll. All right.
It does indeed.
So we will perhaps formalize this format a little bit more in future if people find that they enjoy it. We'll see what ways we want to tweak it. But as the winner of the dice roll, I'm gonna take a opening to kind of give a broad statement about where I'm coming from, and then we'll kind of support that with a few things as we go on. So how about we each kind of make a broad opening statement about what we think, why you should listen to our side of the argument here. Does that sound good
to me?
Okay. So as I've already mentioned, I mean, I've already been seeding the ground in favor of my side of the argument here. There are 47 warbands out there. That's an awful lot of warbands. This is too many. This is a great game, but there's so many variables, and They can't be infinite, right? We have to trim them down, and I'm going to tell you why today. If you just bend your ear to me, Josh.
Well, this game, from its roots, has kind of promised that you're always going to have access to the warbands that you buy. You're going to be able to use them in some capacity, whether that's dusting them off, picking them up, and rejoining the community at some point, or that's maybe you have a favorite from season one and you want to ride that train all the way to the final destination. Uh, so that's what I'm going to argue for, is making sure that the content that we have sticks around.
All right. How about I'll kick things off here? Okay.
Yeah,
So that's true. I hear you say that in your opening statement here. I hear you say that the promise has been there that you'll always be able to use your models, and that's been kind of a GW thing in general, right? Like it's relatively rare. It's not a completely unheard of, but relatively rare for a model or faction to be hard banned from a game, right? If you look at some of the other games, but here's the thing: is like the ground has already been broken here for Underworlds. There are plenty of cards. I have, I want to say maybe 5 pounds of cards that I can't use right now unless I want to play a true relic and go back and ain't nobody got time for
yes,
that
the
madness.
true gentleman's game.
The true savages game. I don't God, it would be nightmarish. But those cards are rotated, and so it's an idea that we can be comfortable with. So I don't see what the big fuss is about rotating a warband when we're already rotating cards.
Fair enough. So the biggest point that I have, and I'll kind of feed off of this, is that variety is kind of the spice of life, and not there haven't been any bad seasons
Mm,
from what I can see. But there have been seasons where some factions aren't as strong as others. Um, Particularly comes to mind the season of Beastgrave. Those factions across the board were, competitively speaking, either super hot or super cold. They
mm.
were either not competitive at all or they were just absolutely wrecking the play space.
Give me some examples here. Justify this.
Yeah, absolutely. So just as an example, you had the prime examples of the hot warbands were goodness.
Watch.
I was about to say Sepulchral Guard was on my tongue, but I knew it was wrong. Grimwatch were very hot in that meta, and Rothgorn was also very hot. Uh, Gosh, now I want to.
So cold he's hot.
So Blade Coven, very cold on release. Very, very cold. Let's see. What other war bands do we have here? Rippa's very hot on release. Like there was no question on that.
I mean, I will say this. I on release, I think they were a slow burn because they came out so close to Grimwatch. But I'm nitpicking here.
I
Yeah,
would agree with you there.
yeah.
They didn't quite take off, but there wasn't much of a change between when people started figuring them out and when they started working.
Mm.
Um, oh gosh, what else are we looking at here? I think I mentioned Wormspat. They started off real cold.
Some might say never ungot cold, never warmed up. Uh,
Yeah, never wormed up. Ha.
hey-o.
All right. Bad jokes aside, though, that was pretty much the release schedule uh, for Beastgrave. Was just very hot, very cold warbands.
Mm,
Um, and it seems like a pretty even split between the two. So if we're talking about rotating to a point where it's with the seasons, that's four warbands that if you want to be competitive are really what you have to go with.
mm. So you're saying if we trim down old war bands, then the number of truly viable warbands at any given moment is going to be lower than it actually even looks on paper.
Right. And it's not necessarily the idea that every warband has to be viable or every warband has to be able to compete with every other warband. It's the idea that the the more you concentrate it down, the fewer options you have at your disposal. Whether
Mm,
that's for narrative play, whether that's for competitive play, and particularly in competitive play, it amplifies any flaws that you see in the game. So if you're in a very melee heavy meta, for example, and let's just put Beastgrave in a box,
mm.
Wrathgorn is a problem. There's no two ways about it. If we were in a rotation situation where we have fewer warbands at our disposal, everybody's bringing Wrathgorn or everybody's losing, kind of thing.
So you're saying that having a bigger pool of warband gives you more potential to answer somebody who might be bullying a given meta.
Absolutely, and it puts a
Mm,
lot less pressure on the developers, GW, to fix said problem because over time people did find solutions to Hrothgorn. It did take a little bit of curbing in the form of Forsaken and restricted options, but from the outset he was a problem. But the community adapted to that problem,
mm.
and some of them were older warbands.
So you're talking about having 47. Are you saying that to be able to drive one particular nail in, you might need 47 hammers to do the trick? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Not necessarily that I need 47 hammers to do the trick. For one, I don't have that many hands to hold 47 hammers. But I might need a socket wrench to work a bolt and a. Jesus, why am I struggling on nouns today?
A nut
Uh,
and bolt.
yeah, nut and bolt. Goodness.
Don't try to use my metaphor against me, sir.
I'm absolutely going to use your metaphor against you. I may need a socket wrench to work a nut and bolt instead of driving that hammer into a nail.
Well, all right. I hear that. What you're saying is that the pool provides more tools for the community to come up with something, and I would argue that you are less likely to develop a problem if that pool is not so big in the first place. Because right now, uh,
Ooh, I'm
ev-
curious to hear this argument.
sure, yeah. So every time look at the contortions they've had to go through, and I'm talking about the designers. Uh, they've had to find ways to create a specific mechanic or create. We've seen restrictions on large fighters. We've seen uh, cards that cannot be given to large fighters. Now cards that if are given to fighters that become large, they'll break. We've seen all these sort of things, and we know who some of the culprits behind these are. We're looking at Hrothgorn and Mollog, right? Like
Right.
those two big guys are even from the distant past of season 2 and 3 are continuing to warp what is available in the card pool. They've again, we have sung the praises of Grand Alliance cards. We like how those can provide a way to limit some of the interactions, kind of give more lanes for developing of mechanics that would be broken in one Grand Alliance but are fine in another, or just continue to lean into a flavor for a Grand Alliance. But these are things that they've had to do because that pool remains so big. As long as Mollog or Hrothgorn remains in the pool, there are certain cards that you just can't print because they will, or you at least you can't print them as a pure universal because those guys will abuse them, um, and uh, and that's a problem in my opinion. In
I
the opinion of the side on which I'm arguing, I should say.
I would agree with you there. So this is one of those points where I'm going to have to reach across the aisle, and we'll put it in our checkbox for the under 30 points that I don't like, but I'll allow.
Don't be
Magic.
reasonable. That's not why people are tuning in.
Oh gosh. Oh
no,
gosh.
no, you can
The
be reasonable.
betrayal,
That's
the
good.
plot twist. Uh, and it's because it's something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's
Hmm.
magic.
Mm-hmm.
Magic has not existed in any sort of reasonable capacity because curse breakers exist.
Okay. Yeah,
And
sure.
they are ready and waiting to break that mechanic in half because they have three wizards that just happen.
Yeah, and it's not just so Magic is a great example. Like, it was a warband that has redundancy, has some inbuilt uh, gambits and upgrades, uh, and we've seen Magic kind of wither on the vine. Even as casters continue to crop up. Um, did you know that the Truth Seekers have a caster in their warband? Uh, I didn't until relatively recently, because I forget. You have these level ones, you can't really salt that in very easily. Um, but it even pops up in other places. We talk about Molag being a problem because of his big size, but there were cards that I'm gonna forget the name of this card. There were two um, there were two objectives. They were surge objectives for moving a second time. You could score those. They were pretty niche, except for one guy. And again, Molag was the problem here. And it wasn't even that he was big; it was that he had this ability to move twice in a time when almost nobody else did. Other people could find a way to score it with, like, a potion of grace. If you had a resurrection mechanic where you'd have a guy move, die, bring him back, move him again. But because Molag existed, there was this kind of cool corner playstyle that couldn't be explored by other warbands, because those cards got restricted, because they had to be restricted because they were a problem on Molag. Well, if you rotate Molag out of the pool, like I'm saying you should, well, then that opens up options for those cards.
See, I would counter with that's kind of a shortcoming, and shortcoming feels like a really strong word in this context, but I don't know what else to put in here.
Mm,
Um, that is something that I wish the developers would do more of with this game, is restricting fighter specific cards, or not
mm,
fighter specific cards, warband specific cards, in lieu of universal cards.
mm,
Because when you restrict universal cards, what happens is you do an even uh, power nerf for all warbands.
mm.
So in this context, where it's one warband that's exploiting that, I get the Forsaken and Restricted,
Mm.
but with warbands like Mollog, the I feel like the better way to handle that is not to rotate him out so much as forsake or restrict cards that are available to that warband specifically.
Interesting.
Because if you let's just take Ferocious Bite as an example.
Mm.
If you were to uh, restrict, is it restricted? Did it
It
get that?
is. It is restricted now.
It
Yep.
is restricted. Okay, I was
Yep.
remembering correctly.
Yep.
All you've done is lower the power curve for all warbands.
All warbands
Most
that have a range one attack that they would buff, right?
correct.
Yep.
Now, granted, not all warbands have or rely on range one attacks, and not all warbands want to up that. That's not the playstyle for everybody. But all you've done is lower the power curve for all warbands equally in an aggro sense.
Mm.
But if Mollog has a dice upgrade, I'm not too familiar.
He's
If
got a
Mollog's
reroll. Foul
right, if
temper.
he's got a reroll or some sort of accuracy buff, and you restrict that instead because Mollog is taking the meta by the horns and throwing his weight around, then you've brought that back into pace as opposed to that. So I guess what I'm saying in a long-winded fashion is rotating the entire warband isn't necessary in the sense of balance so much as balancing that specific warband.
Mm. That's fair. And maybe I've made I will say that I may have brought up a bad example, or one of us has, with Molag, because Molag exists in the weird state of having very, very few in faction cards that are, like, worth taking, right? Like, he's got almost nothing in his objectives, upgrades, or gambits that are like, yep, that's an auto take. And the ones that are now restricted. However, to your point, in Molog's case, when at the time when they did restrict burst of speed and long strider, the two surge objectives for moving twice in a particular phase, something that I just remembered completely on my own and did not just pause the podcast to look up. Uh, they were at that time they did not restrict any faction specific upgrades. We take that for granted now, but that's something they've had to come to. So I think they made that realization as well. So I guess that does. I'll give you a tip of the hat there. I guess that does kind of temper the need for rotating warbands, as if you can find, as they have, these workarounds with the Grand Alliance cards, or specifically restricting a factions cards. So like, if you thought, well, I don't know. Let me ask you this: do you think that works on something that is the current hotness? This may be another debate for other times, but if we look at the Gnarl Spirit pack, do you think you just like hit them with 6 in faction restricteds, or does that just kind of push them into the universal pool completely?
I mean, if we're talking, what I would like is, I would like a warband not to be released where they need 6 restricted slots right off the rip.
Sure.
But that's not the world we live in.
Yeah.
I think it's a difficult ask,
Mm.
and I understand that restricting 6 cards right off the rip is gonna be tough to swallow for a warband like that, because at that point you're just taking the fighter cards and universals
Sure.
is what you're working with, and
Yep.
that I don't think gets as much of the fun of the warband involved,
Mm.
um, and fun's what we play for.
Yeah.
So I, especially in Nemesis, right? Because I
Hmm.
don't think the Forsaken and Restricted has any sway in that
Right.
regard.
Right.
And if you're restricting 6 cards in Nemesis format, well, that's, oh gosh, an eighth of the cards. Am I remember 60, 64 divided by 6? Gosh, I
Carry the
suck at
2
math. Yeah,
square root.
it's almost an eighth.
Okay.
So if you're in a position where you have to do that, that's rough.
Yeah. I hear you, and I exaggerate some. I think that outlier warbands can only be contained so much by restricting their own cards. Is, I guess, why I'm saying that you may still end up needing to rotate a warband. But
And I would agree with you. I think I can tip my hat back towards your tip of the hat on that note.
these these hats are getting increasingly tipped. They're gonna be like just on the side of our heads pretty soon. Uh, Fair. Okay, so we've talked about some of the problems or otherwise that war bands remaining in that, and the fact that whatever you're listening to, certain war bands names will keep cropping up as they go, um, will come up. Uh, I'm gonna. Are you okay if I kind of shift to another kind of focus here for a second?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I've got one that I can shift focus to if you'd like as well.
well, I was going to talk about new players. Is that something worth talking about here?
It In a world where Nemesis is on the tip of everybody's tongues, I think new players is something worth talking about.
Okay, so it's something that's near and dear to our hearts. Like we've got a community that we've grown here specifically, like by trying to lower the barrier of entry. I've already said there are a lot of variables in this game, uh, and right now there's 47 warbands worth of variables. That is an incredible amount for anyone. If somebody feels like they want to get competitive, I'm gonna I'm gonna get in my rocking chair and tell you how I remember the day
Back in
when
my day,
back in my day when I was good at this game. There were only like 4 warbands, at one point, and I thought the game was an incredible amount of fun at that point. I played it when there were 4 warbands, when there were 8, when there were 16, and that felt like a lot of variety. If you are a new player and there's some grognard like myself that shows up and keeps on busting out like his old toys. You're like, "Ah, gosh, I've never even seen these guys before, maybe never even heard them before," and so you have to learn a whole new warbands mechanic. That might be fine for you, but it also feels kind of bad if it's you getting surprised by by some mechanic that there wasn't a reason to exist or reason to think existed. To give a specific example before I give you a chance to rebut here is
Hmm.
I think Hrothgorn is a good one on that, where learning how to play against Hrothgorn, once you've got some play patterns down, you can play against him, you can fight against him. But Hrothgorn and also Ripa, like there's certain techniques and such that you'd use if we stick to Hrothgorn, like the trap, like understanding how the trap works is kind of a big deal, and that can be a big gotcha if you are really focused on the big ogre, learning exactly what his stat line is, and then all of a sudden somebody's throwing down two two damage trap from bushwhack and knocks you out without much in the way of dice being rolled. That's a feel bad, and that's a lot of information, and you don't want to have to learn a new warband every time you sit down to play. So I think having a full slate of warbands like this is kind of a overwhelming barrier for new players, and I don't know what you think about that.
So I can definitely can relate to that. I know that um, this is a problem that isn't easily solved. That's why we're having a lengthy debate about it, and not just a yes, go forth and do. Um, I've experienced a couple of different video games, not necessarily tabletop games, where they've run into this problem.
Oh,
The most common of which is League of Legends.
okay.
So I played back in my college days when there was maybe like somewhere between 8 and 16 champions. Saw it grow, and then now fast forward to modern times where there's well over 100, and you get to a point where the creative juice starts to run dry,
Mm,
or you have to absolutely crank up the power creep in order to make it worthwhile.
hmm.
And then you just get into the whole problem of, why am I not just playing X champion? So that being said, the there's another feel bad that runs parallel to that, not knowing the mechanics of an older warband, and that is returning players. So if a returning
Sure.
player wants to get back into the game, now being a great time to do so,
Yep.
comes back and has their warband that they used to play and they love to play. They come back and they ask, "Hey, I've got this warband. I've got these cards. Can I play?" And somebody says, "Well, nah, none of the stuff you've got is up to speed.
That's
You've got to buy back in."
Yeah, that's fair because we did pick up on a number of returning players, or it has helped us get some people to just check it out because they're like, I've played this once or twice before. I think I still got my stuff. Let me go check.
That's really all I've got on that point. I mean, returning players are returning players, and I don't I don't think there's going to be a large pocket of people, and viewers, if you are one of these people, please feel free to correct me. I don't think there are going to be a large pocket of people that are going to be wildly upset that their 5-ish year old models aren't viable anymore. I'd be a little sad if I wasn't able to use warbands like Sepulchral Guard or um, Eyes of the Nine. As much as they've abused me over the years, I I don't think I would be too sad to see them go.
Yeah, I mean, and you're talking about like you're talking about
But
a warband that has maybe abused you, like as a player of them, as in a player against them. In the case of eyes, like you can,
I mean, a
if
little bit of. I wasn't on the receiving end of when Skylar and Brian came back in thinking they were hot stuff, and you took them to town. But yes, I've been on both sides of the board when Eyes of the Nine came to party,
Hmm,
and not good.
sure. I
But I
mean,
think I'm
gosh.
I think I'm shooting myself in my foot here by saying that statement. But
Well, tell me
at the
this.
same time, go
Tell
ahead.
me this, and tell me honestly, as because at what point, remind the listeners at what point you joined this game.
So I joined this game, I believe, and this is, I believe I came right as Beastgrave launched,
Mm,
and I think the there's no think. The first warband that I brought to the table was Eyes of the Nine,
hmm.
and boy howdy did I take a long time to learn that they were just not
N-
going to do me any
Not
favors
great,
from a
Bob.
competitive standpoint.
So let's say that there was a rotation in place that mirrored the cards. Let's say we said that you can have anything from the current calendar year and the previous calendar year.
Hmm.
Um, Calendar being rough. What used to be the current season and the previous season now is maybe the current season and the three previous seasons, depending on how they actually do things. We're still
Yeah,
waiting to
so if
see
I'm
exactly.
so if I'm understanding you correctly, imagine a world in which Shadespire didn't no longer existed.
Right. Imagine if when you came in, the eyes that you chose to pick up, they were still legal. They would only
Hmm.
be legal for another year or so, and then anything previous was not. In that situation, you would have never played against Sepulchral Guard. You would have never played against Chosen Axes. Um, does that feel like you would have missed out on something, or does that feel like the game would have still been healthy for you? Because I would argue, I think you would have still felt the game was healthy.
That's a great question. So I'm gonna get the cheeky answer out of the way first.
Okay.
Um, so that wouldn't have given me the one win I had at my first tournament, which was against the orcs at the time.
Oh,
So I don't know if it would have been as positive an experience, you know.
sure.
Um, but jokes aside, I do think that as a new player coming in, I don't think I would have missed out on seeing Sepulchral Guard.
Mm,
They've got a pretty cool mechanic, and I
yep.
would love to see something a little more similar to that. Like I would want to see that over time,
Yeah,
if
but I
that
would
makes
argue,
sense.
I would argue they've rotated, and you have kind of seen that over time. You've seen war bands that have, if you they have their ability to move two at once. You see some variation on that with your beloved Ossiarch Bone Reapers, Canaan's Reapers, right? Not
Right.
exactly the same, but similar. You've seen that resurrection mechanic reiterated in a few different ways. So it's not like at the time when the game was new, I might have been like, oh gosh, like you can't get rid of Sepulchral Guard or never see a resurrect mechanic again.
Hmm.
Um, but that's not the case. Like you see those kind of redone and honestly, in a lot of ways, improved upon as the game goes on. So I think if you dispense with the idea that like these war bands, once they leave, like you never get to see them, you never get to see that mechanic again or enjoy that mechanic again. I think you get to see it reimagined or refined. I think that's something to keep in mind too.
I would agree, and I think the overall point that you're trying to make, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that overall new players are not going to miss out on warbands being rotated because
Sure.
there is enough of warband diversity to cover those bases to see what they need to see, and they don't new players don't necessarily have to have those warbands in order for it to be a rewarding experience.
Yeah, I mean, think about how many players. Well, I'm gonna project a little bit. Like, I have a bit of a completionist bug in me, and I know Skylar who,
Absolutely same. I
yeah.
I have a list of warbands and releases that I don't have, and it haunts me.
So if I told you, if I could, I would I take a weight? Would I kindly remove a weight from your shoulders if I said, you know what, Josh, it doesn't matter. Those war bands have rotated out. You can take a deep breath, or would you still feel that itch? How bad is the infection? I guess is what I'm saying.
I would say right now, if you said they were still going to be put on the chopping block and no longer valid, I would still finish that collection.
Hmm.
But if back in ye olden days, when Beastgrave started, and you told me that warbands were going to rotate back then, and you told me, hey, Shadespire, Shadespire's dead. Long live the new Shadespire. Nothing from that season is ever going to be valid in anything but Relic, which nobody in our community plays.
Hmm.
I don't think I would have gone back and collected.
So yeah, it would, as a new player, it might have been a little bit liberating. It might have not felt like there's this whole trove of stuff that you could get if you could just find it, or you could get if you could just afford the $140 it costs on eBay to get it. So
Plus shipping. Don't forget
yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. Uh, so so I think we're looking at a sort of a new player versus returning player versus long-standing player dynamic here, right? Like uh, new players probably benefit from a rotation. Returning players, it's probably a barrier to them returning if we have some kind of rotation. And then long-standing players, someone like me who's been around since the start, has every warband along the way. I'd be sad to see them go, but I would still enjoy. Like I don't get enough reps uh, the warbands come out fast enough that I can't deep dive every warband as they come out anyway. So I think there's so much to explore in the game, even if you limit the number of options available to you. That and I can't speak for every long-standing player, but I can speak for myself in this situation where I have rolled the dice to argue in this
Hmm.
case. That I don't think rotating would, from a competitive perspective, like be a problem for me. I think, yeah. So if I had a situation where the only warbands I could take were from Nether Maze, Harrow Deep, or Gnarlwood, I would be okay with that. Like there's warbands in that I haven't had taken a deep dive on. It would kind of force me to check out some of these that I hadn't. Um, I have spent a fair amount of time with Shadeborn. I haven't with the new rats. I God Godspeed to Phil and to Alex who really have tried to work with the pirate ogre at times. I have not done it, but which is to say, like sometimes I see them do something successful. Actually, I'll say this: when Alex G came up for our at the time we called it Rivals Plus, but our nemesis, and he and I faced off. I was really impressed with what he put together with that guy. And it's those kind of games that make me say like, oh, let me check that out. And I think there's enough room for somebody who is collecting everything and wants to explore a lot of different aspects of the game. I don't feel overly limited by not having access to this massive, ponderous archive of other warbands.
Hmm. On that topic, I I would have to disagree. I would be really sad to see Kanan's Reapers go. I have
Mm,
gotten so attached to that warband, and that is since I've picked that warband up, that has been the warband that I've been excited to deck build for.
sure.
Every card release, there is a the first cursory glance is okay. What is exciting in this deck for Kanan's Reapers?
Mm.
Then it's okay. What else is going to be busted?
Yeah.
So
First,
that's
first, what
yeah,
can I use first? Then who else cares about it? Is that
yeah,
yeah?
absolutely. So that would be an instance where, in my personal scenario, I would be disappointed to see that warband go, and I could now that now that I'm talking it out loud, I hope the listeners have caught on with me this far, so as not to get their torches and pitchforks. I think there is something to be said for nostalgia and familiarity. Now, if we all pick a warband and stick with it forever, that's not healthy for the game.
Mm,
Because if we get stuck on those, there does have to be some sort of forward progression. Otherwise, we're just playing Shadespire forever,
mm,
which I don't think anyone wants. Like I
Somebody somewhere wants
there's
it. Yeah.
somebody somewhere that's like Shadespire was the best Spire. Don't take it away from me. We're going back to season one forever. And you know what? Respect.
Mm,
You know what you like, but it doesn't give us the game that we've got today. We don't have any sort of change behind that. That being said, I'm torn on that.
yeah.
There is definitely something to be said for nostalgia and being able to play your flavor in the current environment.
Yeah. And to your point, there are members of the community that pour energy and effort into this, and they are motivated, to run a particular war band. We think of the Chosen Axes Mafia that's out there. We think of the people who repped Eyes of the Nine deep into Dire Chasm. Like there's people who um, provide an energy and a resource because of their love of a particular war band. So, I mean, I can identify with the nostalgia component for sure. Well, so one thing I'll say is that like we're talking about, you know, we should probably be clear. Like, are we talking about championship format? And I know that's what a lot of people play, but uh, it's one thing to say like tournaments are going to be played with this championship format, and that's going to have a pool of war bands that are rotated. That doesn't mean you can never bring your stuff out to play locally, right? Like,
Right.
we have our own local thing. That's still available to you. You could have historical night or whatever. So
Those
what?
words have those words have literally been sitting in my mouth almost this entire conversation, but I keep telling myself, no, I'm on the no rotate side of things. Don't say that. We don't compromise here. We're here to debate.
Yeah. Uh, so that's available to you, in your local. And there's the argument for playing in a particular way. People like to prep for tournaments. People like to, have again in a game of many many variables. People like to have a particular control for as many of them as possible, which is why you tend to not play a whole bunch of different formats. You um, play one like when Relic was first introduced. A couple of people tried it out, but people really wanted to be playing the one because you didn't want to have a bunch of practice against variables that you weren't going to encounter in a tournament environment.
I would agree.
So I think we've kind of beaten this around the head enough that I think we can maybe sum it up and then kind of uh, come back at it from not necessarily an opposing standpoint. Are you good for that?
Yeah, I'm good for that. Let's go.
All right. So I'm going to try and summarize here. My argument. My argument is this game has a whole lot to keep in mind. Like even if you are a new player and just looking at two war bands, there is so much to try to absorb in this game. Why would we make it have 47 still to grow war bands for them to learn also? That's not to say that we're reducing it down to something super simple. There's still going to be anywhere from 12 to 16 war bands available at any given time, maybe more depending on what we do with that starter box, right? So we can reduce this, make it more reasonable without making it simplistic. And I think that makes it easier for newer players, which are the future of the game. That makes it easier for the designers, who are the ones that make this game possible. And it makes it easier for the people who are trying to teach the game, which is hopefully all the rest of us. And that's why, in my not at all randomized opinion, we should definitely rotate the warbands. Josh, your rebuttal.
I hear it. So, in my also definitely not randomized opinion, I would definitely state the case for nostalgia being a huge, huge part of supporting the foundation of a community. More often than not, the older players that you have in a community are going to support and further the game. So being able to throw them a bone, especially returning players, and letting them play with what they've got and not have to continually buy in just to come back, um, is a pretty big feel bad. I personally know that there is at least one warband that I would be sad to see go. Um, and I know that others out there are probably going to feel similarly. Um, Kind of thinking about that nostalgia factor, there may not be a point where, in at least in my example, there not be another point where there is a Canaan's Reapers like warband. Sure, there's the Exiled Dead. They have a raise mechanic and a unified move mechanic, but it's even visually speaking, they're just that much different, even within Death. So not having that unique theme present could be a huge blow to somebody's willingness to continue on with the game.
All right, fair enough. Well, listener, that brings to the end our debate. Our initial plan was to maybe have a moderator, but illness and labor requirements have decimated our numbers. That's why you're just hearing Josh and I on here right now. But that's why you're still getting an episode. Without our extra flexibility, we might have had to miss an episode for the first time in a long time. So we are Josh and I are going to come together. We don't have someone to adjudicate other than you, the listener, and you should let us know what you think about that. But Josh, having heard both sides, let me ask you this before the roll off: was there a side that you would have preferred to have been on the side of? First, tell me what you would have preferred to argue, and then tell me if you think you fall on one side or the other.
So if I had to choose, I would say I would prefer to have argued for rotation.
Hmm.
I think the idea of it keeps the game moving. I understand that I made a big case for nostalgia, and I personally fall into that boat. I would fall a little bit victim to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think with as heavily as GW is leaning on supporting new players and getting new blood into the game and making sure that it's easy to access, I think that I think that doubles down on that. And the other part of that is I know that I'm nostalgic for Canaan's Reapers, but I also have been looking at new warbands and thinking, gosh, these are actually kind of cool, and I haven't really touched most of them because I've gotten stagnant and comfortable with that single warband. And I think that's led me to a place where I'm a little bit stagnant in my playstyle, where I don't necessarily know these warbands well enough to play against them. That said, I don't think that's the end of the story. I don't think there's a hard and fast way to go one way or the other. What about you? Would did you have any preferences going into this?
It's funny because before going into this, I think I was actually more in the don't rotate. It's not necessary kind of bucket, but the act of arguing in favor of rotation actually kind of warmed me up to the idea of like maybe some kind of rotation is not so bad as I would have thought. Um,
And I think I had the same thing because I know in the middle of that I said, there wouldn't be too many people sad to see the Sepulchral Guard go, and then I remembered Cadence and I was like, oh no, oh no, I've burned myself at my own stake.
Hoisted on my own flaming petard. Uh, Uh, well, I think one thing we talked about when we were talking about the possibility of this is once we kind of debated this out. What let's talk. Is there a middle ground, and what does that middle ground look like? And we touched on it a little bit with the idea of like, what if you rotated, but then your local meta was still available to say like, hey, we're gonna have a night where you can bring your old stuff or something like that. So what do you say we chat a little bit about that? Like we explore that a little bit. What uh, what exists as either ways to rotate or ways to partially rotate or something like that?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I know for a fact that even if there was a hard rotation, they went full on in that direction, and that is law, that is rule, that is exactly how the rule book states it. You can only play warbands from this. There is not a soul in our community that would look a returning player in the eye and say, "Sorry, you can't play that."
Yeah.
I I have zero doubts that anybody in our community would say, "Hey, Glad to have you back. That's the warband you got. Let's throw them on the table. Let's refresh you on the new rules, and still talk about the fact that in competitive play, it's on a rotation, but nobody's going to turn anybody down for a game.
Yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind. Like that is maybe not as big as a barrier as we would have made it out to be during the debating portion of this. Um, I think there's a couple. You know, we talk about rotation as it being like as if it was the cards. Like this card is rotated out, but you know, we've seen it with boards. Like boards rotate too, right? But like we've seen boards that are reprinted, just with a different. You know, like the Amber Trap Nest was a board that just was a makeover of a previous board. The Penitent Throne, maybe. Oof, man, that would be quite the pull if I'm right on that. We'll check. We'll have the fact checkers check that. Get our staff working on that. But uh, they've done it before with boards. You could do it with warbands, right? You could rotate the Sepulchral Guard and then release them again later with kind of revamped. Even if you want new models, you could do it like, hey, here's the new models. These are legal, but also sort of the old ones. Like here's the new cards that you could use with them. I think if you were a diehard Sepulchral Guard player and they re-released that warband, you would probably buy it again, right? Uh,
Yeah, and I think the precedent has been set there for that to be okay. So long as they don't reprint the cards and completely divert from what the warband was, what the cards were called, what they did, kind of thing.
yeah.
They've set the precedent where they've said, "Hey, you can use old cards. You don't have to you don't have to necessarily buy the new one, so
Uh,
long as you're using the most recent wording."
sure. You're
And I
you're
think
talking about if
Center of
I
Attention is a prime example of that.
sure. Yep. Duel of Wits, that sort of thing. So as long
Right.
as they I can use my super cool Shadespire season Duel of Wits, which Josh is a huge fan of, and
Blech. Let's save that for another debate.
I can use that, and I just have to make sure that I'm using whatever the latest printing is. That's a good point, right?
Hmm. Now, that being said, I think it would be really cool to see um, something that I would really enjoy seeing is mixing up seasons in a way that you've got the current meta. So what's in rotation? So let's say for right now, we've got Harrow Deep, Nether Maze, and Gnarlwood. Then we bring in one of the previous seasons to availability. So that being whether that being Shadespire or um, Night Vault or Beastgrave or Dire Chasm added
Mm,
into the mix, and
sure.
then you switch up which season is going to be kind of tacked on with that. So
Yeah.
that kind of satisfies both sides of things. Your your warbands aren't going to truly rotate out as a as kind of a veteran player. You're
Sure.
still going to at least have another opportunity down the way to play
Yeah.
those,
Yeah. I
but it lowers that warband count for the sake of new players.
I like that. Well, I could even get more granular with this. For
Yeah, hit me with
there's a
it.
period where yeah, I mean, so the short is I'm going to say you could say rather than say like okay, it's everything that's current, but also Shadespire. You could say it's everything that's current and also uh, Spike Claw Swarm and like the I don't know, we'll say and the Grimwatch or I know those are two kind of power choices, but you could say everything that's current and Eyes of the Nine and uh, the Despoilers or something like that. You have options where you could just say like here's four other warbands that are also legal during this time, and then somebody who's new comes in and they say, all right, here's the only four I have to refamiliarize myself. I may not have access to those, but like I'll keep
Right.
an eye on those. Um, and I've seen something like that. There was a period where I did a little bit of privateer press, and I'm gonna not remember what they called it at the time, and I wasn't playing much. I was just kind of interested in reading and listening to a lot of stuff about it. Where they would have these seasons where they'd say, here are the warcasters, and whatever the hordes version is. But here's these commanders that you can use, that are kind of defining to that. But here, these are the ones that are specifically like in rotation at this time, or these are the ones. I think they even did like these are the ones that have some sort of favored. So if you take these, then they have some additional bonus or something like that. But point being, they had like a rotating pool that these are the ones that you really are paying attention to at this time, and it almost creates this mini meta, right?
Yeah,
Uh, like if Molag was not in it all the time, that'd be fine, and then would sometimes rotate in, and then you'd be like, okay, I need to create something right now that is capable of dealing with, here are the big things that I need to consider, instead of here's 47 things I need to consider. You're saying here's 20 or whatever.
I would agree. And one thing that I will say is if there is any sort of conversation about compromise and allowing older warbands in, I think the one thing that GW as a game balancer has to do is to pull the brakes on the release schedule.
Mm.
And the way I'm imagining that is, as opposed to having 8 warbands release over the course of a year, you have the core boxes be the new warbands, and then the in between releases, in between the box releases, I should say, be reprints of warbands, making those available to newer players. Because if you just say that they're going to be allowed in this meta, this mini meta, you still have the problem of those warbands not being available.
Sure.
Uh, and GW loves to make them some money. The only people making money off of those older warbands right now is the secondary market.
That's true.
That
Yeah.
money's already been made, and those war bands that are going for 80, 100, 120, 140 in some cases, that's
Hmm.
just going into some random Joe Schmo's pocket.
Yeah.
GW's making nothing out of it.
I wonder, because they do the periodically like print on demand, where they'll say like, "Hey, we're
Hmm.
doing." I mean, a Black Library does it with some of their novels, and GW does it with some of their figures. Are you aware? I don't know. Do they generally do it only with like metal or resin stuff, or do they sometimes do it with plastic?
So, from what I understand, do it. They don't do it to bring things back
Mm.
yet. And listeners, correct me if I'm wrong. I am relatively new to the hobby in the vein that I've only done this for like 5 or so years. Um, but my understanding is that they only do that when they rotate something out, when it's not going to be available for forever or for at least a decent amount of time. They print it to order so that people can get that last fix, and then
Well, yeah, but they definitely have done like if you watch the website, they'll do like here's old Space Marine heroes or something like that, like something that has not been
right.
available for a super long time. Um, are you saying that you think that's just like remaining stock or something like that, or do you think it's?
I have not personally noticed ones that haven't been around for a while.
Mm,
I've only noticed ones where it's this is your last chance to get this. We will print as many as people need, and then it's gone. But I'm not infallible.
so I do know that there's stuff that's been out of print for a while, and I wonder if they could do that with plastic sprues. I don't know, like you figure we're getting way off on this. Like I'm just ignorant about what their processes are. If you figure whatever files they had to design them, those still exist. Not they're doing computer design, but I'm sure there's all the overhead of getting the molds going and all that sort of thing. So
Right. And
um,
it I would imagine that the number of molds that they have hasn't exceeded their storage capacity.
mm,
Like I'm sure someone somewhere has the molds necessary for pretty much everything that they've got.
yeah,
Now, whether or not it's compatible with their current production methods, who knows?
yeah,
But
uh, yeah.
the stuff is
I
there.
I guess what we're saying is like if there was a print on demand option, that'd be pretty rad. You could say like, hey, for the upcoming season, uh, we have let's say we're a couple years down the line for the upcoming season. We have returned to Ulgu, and guess what? Shadeborn and whatever Shadeborn and Dantalos are now print on demand and available. Like get them back in the mix or something like that.
Right.
Like that's a possible way forward.
Yeah, that is one way. And it doesn't even have to be a full refresh, so you don't necessarily have the discrepancy between the old and the new.
Yeah,
Maybe just polish up some of the ones that have been changed in the FAQ anyway,
yeah,
and then slap a current season border around it, and there you go.
sure, yeah. So yeah, I think there's we kind of talked from the perspective of like a hard rotation or no rotation at all, but there's maybe this compromise option of like somewhere in between. Um, and I think the thing that's most appealing to me of like a soft rotation or a rotate hard rotation, but with like a returning blast from the past every once in a while is those mini metas that I might create. And even if it was like not if that particular mini meta was having some issues or something, you'd know it would be temporary, or they could make some change on the fly. It would kind of involve like a more active hand. I think you need to test it out. But right now they have to they kind of have to test against 46 other warbands. The next one has to
Yeah,
be tested against 47 other.
I was going to say
Um,
the same thing. It's something that you definitely have to develop with those warbands in mind, but it's easier to develop with 25 warbands or however many we're at as opposed to 47.
yeah, yeah. Well, I kind of like some of those options, but I will say this: like at the end of the day, whatever the choice is going forward, whatever they figure out, I've discovered as we've brought in new players, I've discovered that like I enjoyed this game. When it first started in Shadespire, and I could be Reavers, uh, Steelheart's champions, uh, the Iron Jaws boys, or the Sepulchral Guard. Like those were the only four options. I thought the game was great then. I've enjoyed it all the way through. Like I've enjoyed Nemesis. I've enjoyed playing Rivals. I've enjoyed playing Championship. I've enjoyed playing team variations. Like I've enjoyed a lot of different variations of that, and that gives me some consolation in being confident that like kind of whatever twist they need to do to kind of keep the game healthy. I think I will personally probably enjoy whatever that twist may be.
I would agree.
Yeah. Uh, and a big part of that is the community that we get to be part of, and I speak of that just the immediately locally, and then on the bigger scale. So, um, good
Definitely
game, good people.
cannot say enough for the community of people we've got involved.
Yeah. Uh, and that's it. I think. You have anything else you want to pitch in on this,
I think
or
the
should we wrap
only
this?
thing that I'd like to add to the to tack on to the end of that is I would love to hear more feedback on this one. I know we definitely didn't excuse me. I know we definitely didn't exhaust the list of opportunities and variations on compromise that we can get here. So I would love to hear from our listeners as far as what they think.
Yep.
What are some other options for rotation and making sure we kind of get the best of both worlds, satisfying people's nostalgia as well as making that access for newer players a little bit less steep. So let us know.
Yeah. If people enjoy this in this kind of episode, then we will return to it. Some of the other topics that we want to talk about, one of them specifically deals with the plot card conundrum.
Oh
Does
right.
the championship document currently says that you can only include a deck plot cards if a universal deck includes a plot card, then you can only include cards from one of those decks, and you can't mix and match. And right now, we don't know what it looks like going forward. Right now, there's no room for Grand Alliance, but there's who knows? Like we might see Grand Alliance Universal Rivals decks. We might see a I don't know, an essential style release of here's Grand Alliance Essentials or something like that. Like here's something that you can just salt into your your championship decks. Like those are still possible. We're still kind of operating, it feels like, with incomplete information about what the future looks like. But that is one of the debates. There's a debate about uh, about card draw, whether it's good for the game. So
I don't know if we can randomize that one. At least if
I,
I'm involved.
I would love to make you argue in favor of card draw.
I know you and the other three would absolutely want to see me on that other side, and
that
I'm telling you, I don't know if I can hack it.
that's the kind of brotherhood we operate here. Uh, so lots of other options for that. But we won't. It's not something we'll necessarily do back to back. But we like to be able to take the opportunity and sort of provide that variety in content rather than just sort of perpetually talking about the meta over and over again. There's plenty of discussion of that available, but we're going to try and keep providing variety. Anyway, Josh, this was episode 95. We're closing in on 100 for the podcast, if you can believe it. So we'll be
I
cooking up
cannot
something.
believe it.
We'll be cooking up something for 100 here in a bit. But coming up, we have a little bit of flexibility in what we can do. So it may be another battle report. We think, based on the roadmap, we may have like another episode or two before we see another new release, but it's always hard to say. It could be a deep dive. We've got it kind of wide open, and so at this time, it occurs to us that we're always open to taking listener input. Uh, there is one just absolute chaos agent of a suggestion, and I believe this came from Sleek's Bowl, my guess, where he
Oh,
was.
if it's the one I'm thinking of,
Yeah.
I'm actually really excited for this one.
So I don't think we can get it together before the next one, but we may talk about this. But this is where we get listener input. The hosts of this cast would do a round robin, and we would all be using warbands that are submitted by listeners, perhaps specifically submitted for their aggravatingness to play. I think what was thrown out was like a Iltharia's Guardians Annihilation build and the like. So, kind
I'm
of,
personally a big fan. I think the initial concept was basically uh, the listeners build a deck and choose a warband, and I think dialing it back to picking a warband and a couple mandatory picks
yeah,
would be the way. Because I mean, part of the fun for me is deck building along the way, but
yeah,
even if you even just that example, Ilthari's Annihilation is just that that in itself is going to be a headache and a half, and I can't wait for submissions like that.
yeah. So I think stay tuned there. We'll make sure to have it open to folks in the Discord. I may give preference to any of our patrons as far as picking something, and then once they're exhausted, we'll open up to the rest. But that's coming. I think the reaction from the hosts has been generally positive enough that we're going to do it one way or another. And if anyone objects, well, they can just grumble while they lose to our superior play. But if you have anything that you want to throw at us, we're always open to options, and we got a few pots on the stove here that we're working with too. As far as that goes, getting in touch with us, it's at WTHcast or whatthehexcast@gmail.com. You can check out more content on themortalrealms.com. There's actually a crossover episode that's coming out, has come out on the Story Phase feed, the Mortal Realms feed. It has hosts from the several different podcasts on the network, kind of talking about big things from the past year, plural years, and year to come. It's worth a listen. Of course, thanks to them for having us on the network. Coming up, we talked about some of our potential new episodes. We do have our regular segment. That's the flavor text quiz. Are are you ready for that? You don't have to beat anyone here. You just have to. You're totally on your own.
I
Um,
just have to be better than myself. That's all.
it yeah. I was gonna open it up to the the whole of everything, since we were talking about like way back into, all the way. We talked about rotation. We talked about all the way back, but gosh, that's I don't know, some 4,000 cards or something. So that feels a little bit unfair. So
Nah.
I will refine the possibilities, but I'll try and keep it. It could be pretty broad here. So, all right, I've got one for you. Ready?
All right.
There's no attribution to this quote. It's a more narrator oriented one.
Okay.
Each construct advances guided unwilling. Sorry, each construct advances guided unwillingly by the skills and experience of countless warriors.
Each construct.
Yeah,
That makes me want to rule out. Wait, you did say you narrowed it. How did you narrow it?
I narrowed it by it is a warband that you love dearly.
It's a warband that I love dearly. Oh, okay.
It is an
Okay.
objective.
It is. That's what it sounds like. Almost want to say it. It sounds like Canaan's Reapers, but it's
It is a Canaan's Reapers card. You're closing in.
construct. I'm trying to think of what they talk about building. Most of what they talk about is like taking what's due.
Well, I think maybe if you, I don't know how much of the background of these guys, the warriors are each bone constructs that are filled in
Oh,
by
they're
the
each
souls of warriors. Yeah,
refer.
yeah.
Oh.
This is a. I'm going to say this is a one glory end phase, if that helps.
One glory end phase.
Each construct advances, guided unwillingly by the skills and experience of countless warriors.
I want. Oh, I'm struggling. No, that's a surge. That is a surge. Is it? Is it the one for each? Uh, each one having a move or charge token?
That's it. It's walking mass grave.
That's what it is. All right, ding, ding, ding. I was better than myself.
Got there. Yeah. So I gotta remember to put that in. I've finally started keeping a document so I remember which ones so I don't repeat them. It's
Oh,
surprising
nice.
how hard it is to keep that track of that. But yes, your recommended listening for this episode is a Death Cab for Cutie track called "Debate Exposes Doubt," and that is off of the photo album from 2001.
Very
And
appropriate.
that's going to do it for What the Hex. I've been Davey.
I've been Josh.
The surge objectives. I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna find this because it's gonna bother me that I'm not bringing it up. Let's
No,
see.
that's fine.
Filter, enhance, objective, surge, speed, burst of speed. I bet you it's burst of speed. Oh no, I've done it in championship. That's why I'm. Show me relic. Oh, this has really asked a lot of the filter. it's like you. I said, show me relic cards, all of them, and it's like you what now? Like, there we go. Let's try this. Burst of speed, boosh. Burst of speed and long strider. All right.
Okay.
So
Another point that I would like to make is that just kidding. Scratch that. That's a point in your favor.
give it to me. No. So give me a second. I'm going to pull this up. If I was a more comprehensive editor, I'd put in like elevator music while you wait. But